Hi, I'm Professor Drew Dawson. I teach contracts in the first year and commercial law, bankruptcy, and business associations. My main area of research is in bankruptcy law. I teach in bankruptcy, commercial law, and contracts more broadly. My real passion for researching the area of bankruptcy is because it brings all of that together. When you have a firm, when you have an individual, when you have a city that's in financial distress, you not only have to deal with the contracts and sort of the transactional side, the balance sheet side, but there's an entire world of relationships that have to be funneled through one proceeding, whether those be through tort, property law, contract law, environmental law, all comes together. So in some way I like it because it brings together, it cuts across areas of law and brings together a bunch of different areas. In that sense, it's one of the last generalist sort of areas. But it's also an area where, procedure is just so incredibly important. And studying the resolution of all of these sort of various and difficult, prickly issues through this procedure is a fascinating lens in which to look at companies, to look at cities, and the role of these sort of entities in our society. There's so many issues in our society today that are actually having to be dealt with. Difficult issues that no one really wants to deal with, but that are having to be resolved and handled in the bankruptcy process. So if you think about the difficulties that many of our cities and states are going through, financial difficulties, and balancing the needs to provide services, also to pay for debts, and sort of to continue cities as vital places, a lot of that has been challenged through the bankruptcy process when we have to start balancing all these different interests. So you can look at what Puerto Rico's going through, even though that's not technically bankruptcy. It's very much modeled on what a bankruptcy procedure would look like. If you look at what's happening in the corporate world, many of the corporate scandals that we read about every day in the news, a lot of these are having to be dealt with through the bankruptcy process. So I'm thinking of the Weinstein Company going through bankruptcy right now. What are we going to see with data privacy as Cambridge Analytica is filing bankruptcy? There's these broad issues that at the end of the day oftentimes have to be resolved somewhere, and that somewhere more often than not is the bankruptcy court. Yeah, if you were interested in thinking about bankruptcy law, besides the first year courses that everyone has to take, it really is essential to take a class in corporate law, so our business associations class. Commercial law, particularly secure transactions. And as with almost any business area of the law, you have to take tax. Probably my favorite work that I've done recently was a project that I called Better Than Bankruptcy. But I put a question mark at the end. And what I was doing was looking at the bankruptcy system more broadly. Oftentimes when we think of bankruptcy, we think of the federal bankruptcy code, to the extent we think of bankruptcy at all. But there's a lot of different procedures out there for handling many of these issues that we generally frame within the debtor-creditor context. And in that Better Than Bankruptcy piece, I interviewed a lot of practitioners and looked through a lot of court filings within state procedures that in many ways mimic and look like bankruptcy, but on a smaller scale, on the scale that would apply to more small and mid-size enterprises. And that small and mid-size enterprise system is where a lot of our economy takes place, and it's also an area that's been most overlooked by legal scholarship.